Okay, we're going to do another strategy session, and hopefully you guys can get some value out of fields. So let's talk about fields. Let's go over in fields. Fields are super flexible, totally customizable. You start out with your field groups. So a lot of the ways that people use field groups is they may have Arizona fields, California fields, Nevada fields, Oregon fields. Anyway, you get the point. You could have all your different states up here, and that way when you're in your transactions, you can automatically set your transaction to a default group. And then you can say, if this is an Oregon transaction, show me my Oregon group of fields. Or if this is an Arizona transaction, use my Arizona fields. Most people use details, commission, dates, loan, all that kind of stuff. Now, one thing I would caution you is, or not even a caution, but more of a tip. In here, I don't use the dates category. I go ahead and put all my dates. I sprinkle those in with my fields. Some people like to see all their dates really close together, and that's easy for them because they can go check on milestones and things like that. I like to have them in the field sections that I'm going to be using, only because when I'm bringing these field sections in and out of the transaction, I want all the like fields to be together versus having to go to my date fields and then go to my detail fields. The other advantage to it is now you have everything on one screen where you can just scroll up and down and you don't have to be switching fields back and forth. Okay, one of the things that you can do is sort the groups. All you got to do is click up here and you can move things around. So if I wanted address below here, I could do that. I can drag them to other sections. A lot of functionality there. Okay, so the groups, we went over those. Now we're going to talk about sections. Sections are this little gray bar here, and this is going to be field grouping. So let me give you an example here. Let me go down to HOA demand. So here are all my HOA demand fields that when we get an HOA demand, we're going to fill out. If, let's say you're going to group your septic. So here's some septic fields. If you're going to group your well fields, if you're going to group your buyer contingency fields, whatever you want, but I would group them like each other so that you can quickly say on your intake forms and other places in the program, you can quickly say, bring in all my fields that have to do with inspection period. That way you don't have to say, add this field, add this field, add this field, add this field. You're just bringing in this whole section. So let me scroll back up to the top. And then you can add individual fields. Now, when you're adding individual fields, you have a lot of different choices. So let's just create a fake field here. I'm not going to store this, but you're going to create a field. Let's just call it hello. Whoops, if I could spell hello. And let's just pretend this is a capital. Let's just say world here too, so you can kind of get the idea. So now you can just copy this. You can paste it into your merge field, and it's going to make it correct. It's going to lowercase and put the underscore in between the two words so that the merge fields, you can add those into your emails. If you haven't checked out my emails, Snowplow, Smart Groups, and merge fields video, definitely check out my strategy session on those. Okay, here's where it gets interesting. You can do text. Everyone understands what text is. Text area, that's a box of text, so it's a little bit more text. You could do a decimal. In decimal, you're going to choose, is this a currency? If so, do you want to add the dollar sign? Do you want to add the 0.00 at the end, or have cents on there? If it's a percentage, do you want the 0.00 at the end, or do you want it to round to the nearest percentage? So anyway, this is in here. Dates. Dates can also have times. So you'll see in there where you can add a time. Number fields. So these are good for in your date templates. Check out my date template video where I go over fallback fields and overwriting. So let's just pretend that your boilerplate inspection period is 10 days. I have a date in here, which I'll show you, called inspection period length. And if it differs from my boilerplate and my contract, I'm going to go ahead and type, let's just say 15. When I type 15, it's going to actually overwrite the 10 in my date template and readjust all my other dates, update calendars, do all that kind of stuff automatically. So what I do is I have these number fields on the TC approval side. I have them look through the contract and see if there's any counteroffers, addenda, anything changing the number of boilerplate days. If so, we're going to go ahead and fill that field in, which I'll show you here in a second. And then you have the choice fields, probably one of the most powerful fields of them all. This is going to give you a bunch of choices to select from. Those can trigger smart blocks. They can also trigger automatic emails and texts to go out. If you have the automated plan turned on, that's the $7 a transaction plan. If you have that turned on, you can definitely trigger stuff through the choice fields. You can trigger stuff through all the fields, but choice fields is a great one to which I'll show you some examples on how to reduce the TC's time in the transaction. So let's just pretend here that we are going to select, let's just select text. And actually, let's go down to each one of these and I'll show you what. So here's the text box. You can see how big that is. Placeholder text is like if this was city, then you could put Chicago in here just to give them an idea of what they're supposed to type in the field. Here's decimal. So decimal, you can put the dollar, the percent. You can also add the cents to it, or you can have it round. So that's that. You can do a date. If you do a date, is the time required? That's going to be one of your other options. And a number field. You don't really need to do anything with the number field. And then at the bottom of the choice, it's going to say, can they select multiple choices? So if it's yes and no, you're going to have this set for no. If it's, what ways are there to access the property? And there's a construction lockbox, a super lockbox, a door keypad, then you may want to let them select multiple selections there. Okay, and then, so that is it for the types of fields. Let me go ahead and cancel this so I don't create that. Okay, so now we come over to our fields, and I'm going to give you a few examples just to kind of dig deep on these a little bit. So you got your address, I got some just property details here. These purple fields, this says show in portal. That means it's going to show in the agent portal and it's going to show in the client portal unless you do not give the client permissions through in the organization screen, the templates for the client portal. Okay, so you can ask questions in here. Obviously on your intake forms, those are dynamic. So you can say, do you have lockbox and property information? If they selected yes, it's going to pop in all these fields under it so that they can go and fill in what they have. We've got the transaction details here. We have escrow details. So I like all my escrow stuff together. Here's the time period that it's due, the escrow money. In our contract, we don't have a due date, but if there is a due date, we'll go ahead and fill it in. If we did have like 2 days after contract acceptance, you could automatically set that up in the date template to say, go back up here, grab my acceptance date, and then add 2 days and make that my due date here. Okay. Okay. Earnest money, let's see, receipt received. So I use a lot of receive dates, because the reason I like to use receive dates is so when the TC receives the file, they'll go ahead in here and say, hey, I received this. I'm going to go ahead and put the date in here. The reason I like this is because now this date can calculate the time period to have it back to the other party. So say the seller gives my buyer something, and in the contract it says I have 5 days to get it back to them, then I can automatically say the date that it was received plus 5 days is going to be my due date from my buyer back to my seller. And then I can set all my reminders on my automated triggers and my tasks, and I can set those off of the dates that we need to return that so that I don't forget contingency dates or due dates. Now I can say 1 day before this new calculated field, I want a reminder email to go out to my agent to let them know that, hey, we only have 1 more day left on the contingency, or whatever the situation is. So here's our disclosure statement. We call it the seller property disclosure statement. That's what SPUD stands for. I've seen a lot of states just use SPD for seller property disclosure. I've seen a number of other names. So whatever your name is, you can kind of look through these and see if any of these apply. We have to do an insurance claims history in Arizona, so I have a bunch of dates dealing with those. We may get more than one. It may be old. We may have to request updates, things like that. That's why I have so many fields in here. And then these days fields, these are these number fields that I add. So in our contract, it says we have 5 days or 3 days to get back to people. Well, if I type 7 in here, it's going to overwrite that boilerplate date and adjust all my other dates based on that. Inspection period. So in my intake form, it says, has the inspection been scheduled? If they say yes, it's going to ask them these 2 questions. If it says no, it's going to ask them this question down here. Here's that inspection period length, where if I typed 15 and my boilerplate was 10, it would update. So that's a days field as well. I also have like inspection time requested. I'll go ahead and put that in. That will trigger something to happen, maybe an email going out saying, hey, listing agent, this is the time and date that my buyer would like to do the inspection. Once we get it confirmed, we'll pop it in here. Once we pop it in here, now that's going to send an email saying to all the parties saying, hey, we've confirmed the inspection for this time and this date. Here's the inspector's name. Here's all the things that you need to have turned on. Make sure all the utilities are on, X, Y, and Z, the things that you guys are normally doing in these emails. Okay. This is our repair request. So buyer inspection notice and seller's response is what we call it in Arizona. So I have a bunch of things in here. So one of the cool things that you can do, I mentioned choice fields. So let's just take a look at this. So this is my repair request, buyer Alexis Follow. So when we receive it back, obviously we're going to put the date that we received it, but we're also going to add in what choice. So let me click on this and it's going to take you back up to the top and it's going to give me 3 choices. So in here, my buyer can choose to ask for repairs or a credit. They can accept the premises as is, or they can reject the premises. Now I can have automatic emails or smart blocks injecting into those emails. So again, if you haven't seen my video on smart blocks, definitely go check the strategy session out on that, and this will make way more sense. Now you can have a condition. If buyer rejects premises and elects to cancel is equal to yes, then send this email. And this email may say, hey, sorry, it didn't work out. My buyer didn't accept the premises. The documents attached rejecting the property will have an escrow cancellation to you in 48 hours. Now that can happen automatically. It can trigger up and get ready to go automatically just based on the TC selecting this field. And this is where the time savings comes in. So if you have a bunch of choice fields, the TC can just fill out fields. As they receive documents, they fill out the fields. Automatic emails are triggering up for you to send. If they would have selected this, say the TC accepts premises as is. Now an email is going to go out, instead of saying we reject it, it's going to say, hey, congratulations, Mr. Listing Agent. My buyer's not asking for any repairs. We can move on to the next section of this transaction. We're going to go ahead and order the appraisal. See attached. This one is a little bit different. Now we're going to attach the request. We're going to say, hey, my buyer is asking for some repairs or credit. Please see attached for details. Give me a call if you have any questions. So by using this choice fields, I can have 3 separate emails trigger to go out. Now, if you don't have the fully automated plan, you're going to be using these more for smart blocks. And now you're having smart blocks come in. What you can do, a kind of a clever way to do it, is create a template email with 3 smart blocks, a smart block for this one, a smart block for this one, and a smart block for this one. So when this email goes out, all it's going to do is pull from the smart block, this, and in that smart block is the full email that you want to send. So it's just going to inject that. Or if you chose this one, it's going to inject that email. So it's just going to strip out the other 2 selections that are not true. So let me scroll back down to the Binzer, which again is our repair request. And we're going to come down, and now after all this stuff happens, like we receive the buyer sign, we send it to the listing agent, it calculates the day, we have to have it back, all that back and forth, automatic calculations happening that I described earlier. But now we're going to come down and we see that the seller has to respond to the buyer. So here is another choice field. So when I click on this, these are the things that could happen or the seller could choose to do. They could choose no repairs. This is going to, like I said before, it's going to trigger an email saying, hey buyer, sorry, the seller is agreeing to no repairs. How do you want to proceed? And then they have a couple choices in our state on how to proceed. The seller is agreeing to a credit in lieu of the repairs. A separate email goes out for that. The seller is agreeing to some repair. So you get the point. These are the choices that could possibly happen in our transaction. And then we have corresponding emails and smart blocks depending on which one we're choosing. Let's go ahead and come down here to that again. And so if you are working on these sections, what you can do, a clever thing to do, is come up here, sort the sections, go ahead and pull this Binzer up to the top so you're not constantly scrolling down, and then when you're done working on it, you can just pull it back down to where it goes. Okay, so let's take a look at the third choice here. Buyer's final response to seller. So that's the back and forth we have in Arizona. Your process may be totally different, but we can definitely customize it to your process. So the buyer accepts no repairs, and we're going to move on and order the appraisal. The buyer accepts the credit in lieu of repairs. The buyer accepts some repairs. The buyer accepts some repairs and a credit. So you get the point. These choice fields are going to trigger those emails that are going out. Okay. Now it's coming back down, and you can do, like, let's say the seller agreed to do 10 repairs and they've done 7 of them and they send them over. Well, that's not good enough because they need to do 10, but I do want to send out this email as soon as I receive this information. So when I put a date in here that I received some of the repairs, it's going to attach all the photos, it's going to attach any descriptions they gave us, it's going to attach any documents they gave us, and it's going to send out that email. But it's also going to say in that email, hey, buyer, the seller's not done. They've only completed some of the repairs. So this is not satisfied, but I wanted to send you this stuff right away. When all the repairs are complete, I'll go ahead and fill that in, and it'll send out the final email to everyone, letting everyone know that that has been satisfied. Here are all the pictures and descriptions, and everything's done, and we're good to move on to the next section. So depending on your process, you may have 4 or 5 of these fields that you need to put in here. You may only have 1. Okay. And you can look at some of our other stuff here to get some ideas on, how we do things. We have a loan status update that's due on the 10th day in Arizona, so I have that here. We may have requests for other loan status updates, so we put a couple in here just in case there's 4 or 5 of them throughout the transaction. Most times we don't have more than 4. Okay, lead-based paint. Here's some things that are going to trigger. Also in the intake form, if they said that lead-based paint was yes, it's going to trigger these fields to come in. It's going to trigger my lead-based paint task to come in. It's going to trigger my lead-based paint, task documents in. So everything can be triggered by one yes or no question. Here's the HOA that we talked about earlier. So there's some information on that. Here is the HOA demand. So all the stuff that we fill out when we receive the demand, make sure that there's no violations, things like that. And if there are violations, we can put it in a text box down here and then have this automatically inject as a smart block into an email letting them know what those violations were. So we have master HOAs in Arizona, so we also have a master HOA addendum versus a regular HOA addendum. We have the other demand, which is basically the same fields except for it's with the master HOA instead of the regular HOA. We have an affidavit of disclosure, not important. We have a septic. So here's if there's septic, here are all the fields that I might need. Here's the well. Here are the well fields I might need. Fire contingency. Solar. Here are all your special conditions. So I'm creating separate sections for each of these. So if they checked yes, there's solar, I'm bringing in these solar fields in one shot. I'm saying bring in the solar field section, not the individual fields. Now what you can do, and kind of clever, is you can bring in, or you could delete a whole section and then just bring back like 2 of the fields if you need to. So a lot of different ways to save some time, save clicks. Here's the appraisal. So I may delete all this out, but then I may bring back in the requested and confirmed because they could still order an appraisal even if it isn't contingent upon it. Home warranty, cure notice, signing and closing. Again, these also are adding it to the API calendar. So if you want that date to show up or have the ability to put it on someone's calendar, you're going to want to click this and make it purple with a little checkbox. I'll point out if I can see any other ones that aren't clicked. So you have an example. It's just a gray box with a little line, a dash in it. Okay, so in the intake forms, these are the questions that I ask my agents. You can do this on the TC side, but I ask my agents, is there an HOA? Is it built prior to 1978? Fire contingency, septic well, lease solar, own solar, you get the point. All the things that I've been talking about this whole process. These yes or no questions will trigger certain things to happen. If this is buyer contingency, then all the fields, documents, tasks, they'll automatically come into the transaction. Here's the one I showed you on the email and smart blocks strategy session. You'll see this as one of my fields that has to be yes for something to happen in my escrow email. Okay, additional terms here, all the waive things. These are going to affect. So if there's a waived loan contingency, I don't need to bring all those fields to do with the loan in there. If there's a waived disclosure statement, I don't need to bring in those fields and those tasks and those documents and all the other things that go along with that. So then you can get super creative. And as you get more used to the system, you can say 30 days before contract acceptance. Then you can say if this other date, say they delivered a document to you and you put the issue date. So we have an issue date as one of our fields. We put in the date that like the insurance company sent us the insurance history. And if that issue date was 3 months ago, then I'm going to say if that date is less than this date, automatically send an email back to the listing agent requesting an updated version of that document. So you can get creative with these and then have automatic emails and smart blocks going out based on if these documents are too old to accept or if you need a new one or, anything you can think of. So that's a brief synopsis of fields. I mean, obviously we went into some detail there. We didn't go into a lot of fields and see all the different fields and the choices that I have in there, but that gives you an idea of how you can utilize this better. One of the things that I do want to point out before we go here is the intake form. So if on your intake form, you don't want to have a pull down because it does take a couple extra seconds to select a pull down versus having those little dots, those radio buttons, those yes or no. So if you did want to, like say, here, go back down to my questions that I have for the agents. Go back down here and I'm just going to click on this one. And you're going to see that I have the radio buttons turned on because this is a yes or no. And I want it to be really quick for them. I want them to be able to go down through those 12 to 15 choices and say yes, 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 no, yes, no, and do it quickly versus having to pull down that box every time and choose from yes or no. So that's one little shortcut that you can take if you're putting these things into forms. The other thing is if you have, say, 5 things, you can stack them in a line. If you don't stack them and you have 5 radio buttons, they're going to get out of whack and the formatting is not going to be right. So you can utilize that stack options there. Okay, I think that's all I wanted to cover for now on fields. Hopefully that helps. Let me know if you have any other questions. Hit up our chat or just contact me directly and we can sit down and have a little strategy session and make sure that your fields are right for your state and your individual situations. Thanks, guys. Have a great day.